Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of The Last Round, off of one of the best fights, main event fights on ESPN this past week, in ESPN Plus. One of the best fights I think we've all have ever seen, which is, that doesn't happen too often. You know, it's a rarity in combat sports especially. But once again, guys, we appreciate whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Boxing Socials, YouTube, wherever you're at, however you're listening, we appreciate it. And once again, he's back, and it's his birthday. Kevin Iole of Yahoo Sports. Happy birthday, and welcome back to The Last Round.
Man, I am so much older than the last time I was on with you guys. Unbelievable.
We thought you were about, what, 30, 35? That's what we were guessing.
Yeah, I'm 38 right now. Getting close to 40.
But it is your birthday actually today. We are recording this on October 4th, 2020. And it is your birthday, so happy birthday. But as I mentioned, Mike, before when you agreed to come on the show, he told me the other day he was able to message you and you were good to go. Mike actually found some events that coincide with the date of your birthday at different years. So go ahead, Mike. Mike wanted to take the lead on that.
So on the same day as your birthday, not the same year, Kevin, before you get offended by this, Sugar Ray Robinson with a KO2 win over Joe. You're going to have to help me out, Danny. Echeverria, is that how you pronounce that?
Echeverria?
Echeverria in New York. That was the professional debut of the legend Sugar Ray in 1940. You may have attended this. Lennox Lewis, KO1 over Andrew Golota. And on the same card was Arturo Gatti against Ruelas, which was actually named Fight of the Year, Knockout of the Year by Ring Magazine in 1997. One that you touched on, James Toney, KO9 over Evander Holyfield in 2003. And on that same card was Joel Casamayor with a win over Diego Corrales.
What do you think about that? All those events on your date of your birthday?
Well, the guy that I consider the greatest fighter of all time having debuted, I actually was in person and saw Sugar Ray Robinson's last fight. It was in November. I think it was either late October or November of 1965. And my dad was a boxing fan, and he used my mother, an excuse. Let me take Kevin because I want to teach him about boxing to the thing as a birthday gift. And of course, he just wanted to go to the fight card. But so I was actually at the Pittsburgh Civic Arena, and there was no way of knowing at the time. But it turned out to be Robinson's last fight. So for me, I look at it when you think of all, boxing history, that I think two of the three glamour divisions are heavyweight, welterweight, and middleweight. And I was able to see in person Sugar Ray Robinson, Sugar Ray Leonard, and Floyd Mayweather, a pretty good group of welterweights.
Was that your first fight you ever attended as a fan?
Yeah, I was just a young boy. So yeah, I think I was 6 at the time, and that was the first one I was ever at.
Man, 6 years old at your first professional fight. Man, that's crazy.
Yeah, thanks to my dad, because he was a fight fan and kind of wanted to go, so I got lucky.
It definitely rubbed off on you.
Yeah, I loved it. When I got into boxing, believe it or not, Ali and Sonny Liston, it was on television, and I think Ali was just so much in the news, and I was just fascinated by it, and so that I loved Ali from the beginning, and to this day, he's my idol and a guy that I've looked up to and admired, and just having been around it all that time, I feel blessed, but I've loved it all my life.
Sweet. We obviously all love the sport of boxing, and the more fans, the merrier. So we're all covering the sport and supporting the sport as much as we can. But kind of jumping into some recent topics that have been a little bit more prevalent in the sport of boxing throughout the last week or so. One of the major, or more, I guess, intriguing topics that has been discussed was how the pay-per-views, how well the pay-per-views sold in the Charlo event a little over a week ago, the Showtime pay-per-view. There's been different numbers reported, some by credible sources, some by not so credible sources. So it just depends. Just kind of give us your take on that. Have you heard anything on those numbers, and maybe your whole take on the whole pay-per-view market in the sport of boxing or combat sports?
Well, number one, I didn't actually post a story on it because I wasn't 100% certain. And this is one of the problems that happens in pay-per-view numbers. You hear a lot of things or think, there was one fight that somebody got mad at me because on Monday they tweeted out, I think it was the Spence Garcia fight, they tweeted out a number. That fight was largely a cable satellite fight. There's no way. It is impossible to know how well you did on Monday because of the collection system and the accounting system that they get to get the pay-per-view. So on Monday, if somebody says that they have a number on a fight that's been on cable and on satellite, they're lying. They don't have that. Now, if it's on digital, like now the ESPN pay-per-views are digital, that they will know because those count immediately so they can get. So that's just a little background. But I had heard a lot of information, but I was never able to confirm. But I felt like it was about 75,000 was the number that I had gotten. I was about 85-90% certain of it, but I did not want to write it, and I didn't put it on Yahoo Sports because I don't want to put something out there if I'm not 100% certain that it's accurate. So I did not do it, and there were various numbers that were thrown around, but we were talking off the air about there was somebody that had a burner account that was just going out there, and it was ridiculous, and talking about 200 and potentially up to 250,000 that the show did, and there was no way it did that, and I just got annoyed because you could see through what the person had done. And, he had tweeted a lot of incorrect information before. And so, I don't mind people, I have no dog in the fight. It's not like I was rooting for Showtime to do poorly. I was rooting for them to do well. It's good for me and my job if they do well, as well as the fact that I just love boxing. So I wasn't rooting for them to do poorly. But it hit me a wrong way to see this guy who clearly had a burner account, who was putting fake news out previously, now going out there. And for some reason, people believe this. And so I kind of went back and forth with him a little bit. That was the history of it. But, if you look that night, they went up against a UFC pay-per-view that did 720,000. Then they went up against NHL Stanley Cup Finals, NBA playoffs. College football was on that night. You had Major League Baseball going. They had an unbelievable slate of opposition that they were going up against. So even if things had gone really well, they weren't going to get to 200,000. And at the price point that they were at, I think, some of the Showtime people were arguing with me before the fight, this is the normal pay-per-view number. And to me, it's not the normal pay-per-view number, and you can set the number whatever you want. And I just kind of felt like, it was short-sighted in a pandemic with everything that was going on. To do that. I felt like the fans deserve that, that fight card, for free, frankly. But if you're going to do it on a pay-per-view, make it a little bit less than $75.
Kevin, how have the figures been year-round for, fight sports in general? Because I know that you cover, obviously, boxing and MMA, because I think it was Yahoo Sports or some big news outlet put out that the NBA viewership is actually down 45%, and it's been the lowest since 1994. So in combat sports overall, how's it been?
Well, I did a story. This was in sometime in August, and UFC was the only sport that their TV ratings had been up during the pandemic, and they had a million buy pay-per-view during that time. And I think that part of that was they came back and they were the first ones, and there was nobody else going. And so there was a little bit of controversy at the time that they were doing it, but I think they had the sports world to themselves, and I think they made new fans by doing that, and that was the gamble that they took. But they went out there and they attracted new fans. There's no other sports going on. There's no distractions. There's no new TV shows being filmed. All it is was dreary news. And so when they put fights on, there was people that were interested, and they made some new fans, and they were fortunate. Things go in cycles, and the UFC happened to have a great summer in terms of really good fights. And so I think that helped them too, because they get these new fans come in, and then week after week after week, they're putting on these big shows. Top Rank actually did fairly well. They led for most of the summer their time slot on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They got pretty good numbers, but they weren't getting the kind of numbers that UFC was getting. Now, UFC was generally going on Saturday, and they were going during the week, which is also another issue. But so Top Rank was happy with what they had done, and ESPN was happy with Top Rank what they had done. So but I think what happened, and one of the things that has to concern everybody, is the public learned they can deal with, they can live without this, right? They found other things to do to occupy their time instead of watching fights or watching basketball or watching hockey or whatever sport we're talking. Even the NFL's ratings have been down. So I think as promoters in boxing, they always need to be vigilant, but they really need to be vigilant now, given what's going on.
Do you think we'll ever see like the huge numbers we used to get with, Floyd? Even Manny Pacquiao obviously does great numbers, just due to the amount of illegal streaming and how easy it is for, people stream it on Instagram, they stream it on Facebook. Right.
Yeah, I've done stories on the illegal stream business, and it's tough. And, I learned my lesson. I thought when the Wilder-Fury fight was made, and usually I'm pretty good. You can ask a lot of boxing managers. They'll call me and say, what do you think the number's going to be beforehand? People at HBO used to call me because I had a really good sense of what a number would be. And I would come within a very close percentage in my initial guess. And Wilder-Fury, I went out and I said, I think this is a 2 million pay-per-view. I thought for sure 1.5 million. And I thought if things went the right way, they could hit 2 million. And then you looked at the promotion for that fight, and it couldn't have been better. They were on the Super Bowl, they were the College National Football Championship game. All of this stuff that they were on, and it was promoted so well by ESPN and Fox. They both did an outstanding job. These guys were everywhere the week of the fight. They were wall to wall. And then it did. Like I say, disappointing. I mean, it did 800 some thousand, which is not a disappointing number, but it's disappointing when you're expecting almost double that or more than double that. And I think that was due to the streaming and the piracy that's out there. People are stealing this at a high number. They don't realize when they do it, you're hurting the fighter. You're not hurting anybody more than you are hurting the fighter. They're stealing directly from the athletes. And, so they make whatever they want to say about it. That's what happens. But you're right. It is all over the place. And I actually went in with one guy, and I watched it behind the scenes, and he was showing me he had filmed like Facebook, and you would see there was a lot, one fight stream would go down and 20 others would pop up as soon as that one would go down. So it was really nuts, to see. And there's just so much of it out there that, hey, if you do 800,000, you're doing pretty good.
What is it, Kevin, that you weigh up when you take into consideration and you do like the guesstimate of how many pay-per-view numbers that it will get?
I think when you look at it, you first have to take the two fighters, and do they cross over? If they're just known in the boxing industry, that's not good enough. They have to have appeal beyond the boxing public, so that the public that I would say that watches Sports Center, that sits there and wants to see what the scores of the baseball games were, and the scores of the soccer games, and the scores of the football game, and they don't necessarily follow boxing on a regular basis, but they know there's certain names that they know that are in the media. So that is number one. You have to have that. Number two is the matchup is appealing. You want to go out there and you want to have a matchup that gets the hardcore fans talking, because then that trickles down. It goes to the media, then it goes to the casuals. The hardcores are almost always going to buy it, so they don't count. They literally do not count. And the boxing hardcore fan base is the smallest of any of the sports, so their numbers just don't matter outside of that. And then how is the fight marketed and promoted? And that is a big thing. Are the fighters available? And it's like they have to be in the media a lot. You have to have them where their names popping up. And it has to be a lot of different stuff. You want to be in the grocery store and hey, there's a Canelo by the beer display, and there's Gennady Golovkin over here. Then you turn on the Tonight Show, and there's a fighter on TV or whatever it is. You want to have them all over the place to touch all these bases, and that's and of course the free media helps. The more free media you get, generally the undercard don't help. I argue for strong undercards because what I try to say is I say if they put strong undercards, number one, you're giving your customers value for their money, but you get that fan that hasn't watched boxing in a while. Let's say they got tired of all the fighters getting stripped and they can't tell the goofiness in the WBA, who's champion and who's not champion. So they walked away from boxing. So one night they end up in front watching a pay-per-view. And if they see a fight like Baranchyk and Zepeda on a pay-per-view and they see those kind of fights, they might say, hey, this is what boxing's about in 2020. I want to come back. And so I think, it takes a little bit of money to invest to get those kind of cards. But if you have matchmaking, that's what the UFC does. The UFC doesn't always have, these elite fighters going against each other, but they have evenly matched fights that the public knows are going to be fun to watch. And I think boxing needs to, really, focus on trying to do that a lot better.
Kevin, do you think that's why, because obviously the pay-per-view market is a lot different than it was, let's just say 10 years ago, even maybe 5-6 years ago, like someone like an entity like DAZN is putting such an effort into putting like these YouTube kids or YouTube stars onto fight cards, Logan Paul, KSI, and now they're talking about Floyd Mayweather, Logan Paul. Who knows? I'm assuming that would be some type of Showtime or PBC related event. But I mean, like especially for someone like DAZN who is a subscription based model, and you can get it on your mobile tablets and computers. It's a lot easier for the fan base of those YouTubers to be able to access that because it's familiar to them. Do you think that's a primary reason, right, from a business perspective, why someone like DAZN or any of these other entities are trying to put on these YouTube fights, because it gets attention?
No, I agree. I mean, I think it's really good that they do it. Like I'm not a purist. I want to see boxing do well. So whatever it takes for boxing to do well. Now, I hate the joke fights and everything, but if you have the two YouTubers fight each other, I don't care about that because they're not hurting any. Fighting Floyd Mayweather is a different story. So if you bring them, but the problem that I think that we've seen specifically with the YouTubers fighting each other is they have their own audience that's not a boxing audience, and they come to watch that fight. And anybody who was at the Staples Center for that first one when one of the Paul brothers, was it Aaron Paul or Logan Paul? I'm not sure which one it was, or Jake Paul fought KSI. Every time a YouTuber would walk in, fights are going on in the ring, and everybody's looking off to the side to see who's coming in. They paid no attention to the fights, and I don't think that boxing gained any fans from that. So it didn't. I don't think it really added much value to it. I think it was a good try, right? Why not try it and do it? I think they hurt themselves a little bit in another way. I mean, especially on that first one, when you look at that card, Devin Haney fought. He wasn't in a particularly competitive fight. I mean, Devin Haney is one of the best guys out there and a supreme talent. Put him in a good fight and let's see him fight. And I thought that the card was a little bit weak in that regard, and that hurt. But I don't have a problem with them doing those YouTube fights if they don't make a farce of the sport. But you have to, anything to promote. But you have to make sure that you're appealing and you're getting your own fan base to turn out.
We kind of touched on it just then, but you live in Vegas, so I may as well ask the question. Floyd Mayweather, Logan Paul, how real is it?
I don't think at all, but who knows? I mean, Floyd. Floyd. I didn't think Floyd would be fighting a bantamweight kickboxer either. So that happened, and so who knows? But I just don't think Floyd wants anything to do with that. I mean, you saw the other day he made a comment. Well, I'll fight McGregor again, and I'll fight Habib again for $300 million. I think even since he retired in 2017, that is, it's a little bit harder now to get that kind of revenue and money back. And, here's a small thing. Floyd, it would have to be an exhibition. And then how do they pay? Because Floyd is going to go in the Hall of Fame this year. And if he's on the ballot, if he takes a fight, he's no longer eligible for the Hall of Fame. So he'd have to at least wait until after he was elected to do it. So it's it's a crazy thing, but I don't believe there's anything to it. But I could be proven wrong on that one.
I mean, don't you think that someone like Floyd Mayweather, because he's done so well in terms of not just boxing but in the business side, obviously, like I feel like sometimes he throws certain names out there, like a Logan Paul, for example, just to see what the interest is and if it gets any type of traction.
Right.
Like I feel with the whole McGregor thing, that's what happened between both parties, and they saw that it gained a lot of traction and that it was essentially real. So they're like, I think that kind of pushed them over the edge, and the negotiations were like, you know what, let's do this because we're going to do well. And I mean, do you think that happens?
I think, there's a couple things to what Floyd does. I mean, Floyd is like a lot of other fighters. He loves the spotlight. He loves the limelight. And so, it's hard for him. You think, I think it was the first Golovkin-Canelo fight, maybe the second, he announced he was fighting the Japanese guy, right? When the whole boxing world's looking at this, he needs to turn attention around and go here and say, hey, look at me, I'm doing this. And I think that's very real. I talked to Sugar Ray Leonard, a good friend of mine, and we talked about his comebacks and, you missed that attention. Oscar De La Hoya, look, I mean, it's sadder, Oscar has addiction problems, but, how many Canelo fights did he miss? And it was he went into the hospital, into rehab, because I think right around the time that Canelo's fighting and all that attention, he misses that, and it puts him into a into a kind of a funk. So I think that is a very real thing. But I also think like you said, Danny, I think that Floyd is smart, and he uses that, and he saw, hey, there was a market there for the McGregor fight, and he looks and goes, this is an easy fight for me to take. It looks like this is going to be a massive pay-per-view. Why not? And so he kept the talk up and kept going. And it turned out, I mean, it was a 4.4 million pay-per-view. It was amazing for a fight that, he could have won in the second or third round, and he let it go for, to the 10th round. I mean, it was remarkable. The second biggest fight ever, second biggest gate, second biggest pay-per-view. I mean, it did remarkably well.
Conor McGregor, Manny Pacquiao. Obviously, that's been, they've been going back and forth, and they both released some type of statements and stuff like that. How real is that?
No, I don't think real. I mean, I know that Conor wants to fight, and so here is the issue that's going on. It's all Manny Pacquiao side, and now the Conor has kind of burned Dana White by putting out those text messages that he and Dana White had back and forth. He has lost Dana White's support too. That's a big problem. But so some of the hurdles, they're going to need to have Dana White's okay. Adi Attar had told me when this came out, and I first called Adi Attar, who is Conor's manager. I said, have you talked to the UFC about this? And he said, yes, they've given us their blessing. Well, it was the middle of the night in Abu Dhabi where Dana was, so I could not reach him until the next day. And when I reached him, he said, well, I didn't give my blessing. He called me and said he wanted to do the fight. I says, okay, go out and do fact-finding and report back to me, and I'll talk to my people, and we'll see what happens. Very different than giving his blessing. But then Manny, as we saw before, when he had Oscar and Top Rank promoting him at the same time, Manny's situation is all messed up. So the statement you alluded to that Manny released, I released that on Twitter. I got that from an attorney, a very high-powered attorney from a large firm in the U.S., O'Melveny. David Moroso was the attorney who represented Manny in a number of cases. And I had actually reached out to him the day it originally came out, and he didn't get back to me. So he sent me the statement last week, and I'm still working on another story on that. But what had happened was he said, Adi Attar is not Manny's manager. Manny has, Pacquiao Sports and Entertainment. He's creating this. And if terms are what he wants, he'll take the fight. But there's, Adi is not his manager and doesn't speak for Manny. Of course, Adi got upset, called me and, said, I am his manager. And that just shows the ridiculous nature of what Pacquiao's situation is all about, because who knows who has him. I talked to so many people last week, PBC people are saying they have him, TGB saying they have a promotional deal with him. Top Rank told me that they had talked to him, and Bob Arum did a Zoom with him. And Bob Arum said that, he told Manny, hey, look, they wanted him to fight Terrence Crawford in Qatar. And he said, we can bring Heyman in, no problem. If you just tell him and we'll get Heyman in on this deal. Manny said, no, I have no deals. And Arum said, well, I need you to sign a document stating that so I protect myself. And Manny signs the document, says, I'm not represented by anybody. And now there's 10 people claiming they represent him. So it's just nuts, And so with Manny, that makes it really hard to get done. Does Audie have a managerial contract with him? Maybe he does. I don't know. Does Tom Brown at TGB have a promotional contract with him? Perhaps. Does PBC have a managerial contract? Maybe they do. They all could be telling the truth. They could all be lying. We don't know. But Manny, there's always that craziness.
Do you know if people? I mean, obviously, it doesn't seem like we don't know what the truth is in terms of who he's with or if he has any long-term deal with anybody. But he's obviously had his last few fights under PBC, with Al Heyman. From the news you heard, especially after his first fight with PBC, was that from the beginning like a multi-fight deal, or was it like a case-by-case basis, fight by fight?
The way I understood his deal with PBC was that he signed a 2-fight deal with an option for a 3rd fight. So he fought Broner, Thurman, and then had the option in the PBC/TGB had a certain amount of time to exercise that option and say, yes, we want to go forward. So as I understand it, as they claim, they have done that. And so they claim that they have another fight with him on their deal. Arum talked to him about a Terrence Crawford fight, as I said, and Manny directly claimed to Arum, if you believe Arum's telling the truth, and I don't think he has any reason to lie, on that, that he has a signed document that Manny said he's clear. I know Audie went to the Philippines and Manny signed a document. That's on video. There's no question about that. So he signed a document. But then David Moroso is, from a major firm in the United States. And Audie said, well, he's not Manny's lawyer anymore. He's Mike Collins' lawyer. Well, the problem with that is Moroso is an officer of the court. And if you claim to represent somebody publicly and you do not, you could lose your bar license, which would be millions of dollars. And he's not going to lie and do that. So I would say that, he has a relationship with Manny Pacquiao. So it's just it's a convoluted mess. And I think the short, the answer is because of all that, the fight's likely not going to happen.
Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury 3. Will it happen before December or before the end of the year?
Well, I talked to people at Top Rank yesterday. Almost certainly going to happen in 2021 if it happens. Not going to happen this year. But they are making progress on having fans at Allegiant Stadium, which is where the Raiders play here in Las Vegas, and having that go down. So that could happen sometime in January. It wouldn't surprise me even if it went to February like it did last year, that had that 3rd fight in February. It's going to be a big fight in terms of how much they pay. So they're going to need to have people in that building, at least some kind of gate. They're not going to be able to get the same type of gate that they had at the MGM last year, but they need some people. So I think it wouldn't surprise me if it went as far back as into February, so they would have a better chance of having a larger crowd there. Was there
something wrong with Wilder, like an injury? Because his social media has just been a complete blackout, ever since he lost that fight.
Yeah, he got injured originally right after the fight, but then he's okay. As I understand it, he's okay now, and he's working out. He just fired Mark Breland. After saying he was going to fire him and then changing his mind, now he got rid of Breland again. I think, as far as I know, Deontay is healthy. I haven't personally talked to him. Deontay is one of the really good guys in boxing. I mean, really a truly good guy who I like and respect a great deal. I think he's healthy. It's just, I think the whole kind of crazy scenario here is, he kind of felt betrayed to a certain degree by the reaction to the fight and by Breland throwing in the towel. And that's been tough on him. But I don't believe there's anything physically wrong with him right now.
There's been when that news broke that he parted ways with Mark Breland, fans always obviously chime in, especially on social media. And I don't know if Fury actually acknowledged anything in terms of that topic, but people said, okay, he should go to Fury's camp. and help Fury for the third fight. I mean,
does Fury need that help?
Right, exactly. But I mean, obviously, that's just maybe like some banter or some speculation. But I mean, like, what? I mean, do you think that's realistic? Would he ever do that?
I think Breland is a classy guy, and so I wouldn't surprise me if Tyson called him up and said, "Hey, Mark, come in our side, and just to play with his mind, right? Play with Deontay's mind." And have Breland there with him. It reminds me back when Diego Corrales and Floyd were going to fight for the first time, and Diego was having threatening to go to jail on domestic violence charges, and Floyd brings Diego's ex-wife to the event, and he brought her to press conferences and everything else. So it was, he got in his head that way, and so it wouldn't surprise me if Tyson wanted to do that and bring Breland in. But I think Mark is a really classy guy who isn't a joker and isn't a guy to play games. And I think, if he felt like Tyson Fury thought he could add something to his camp and would help him, then he would probably go in. But if he felt like they were just bringing him in as a prop, I don't think he would do it.
Tyson said it after the last fight when the rumor was that Wilder was going to get rid of him on an IFL TV interview. He kind of made a statement, if that happens, then, Mark Breland always has a place with us. And like Kevin said, I think it would probably, some of it would be the mind games, seeing, Wilder's right-hand man in the opposite corner.
It's crazy. I mean, it's happened before. Angelo Dundee was Ali's trainer. And for the Jimmy Ellis fight, he was in Jimmy Ellis's corner, right? Because he managed Jimmy Ellis as well as trained him. And he only trained Ali. So it's happened, many times before. I think, both Deontay and Tyson are the kind of guys that won't affect them. I mean, Deontay is an emotional guy, no doubt, but I mean, he's a professional. He's one of the best fighters in the world. And I don't think, even if Breland was in the corner and was the one that walked out to the center of the ring at the stare down before the first bell, I don't think that would really affect him. But, it'd be fun for us in the media to speculate and talk about, no doubt.
Teofimo Lopez, Vasily Lomachenko, October 15th, I believe.
October 17th.
17th, I'm sorry. What's your take on that?
Well, number one, I am very happy it's on ESPN because I think for the fans that, this is a fight that's a pay-per-view fight that you're going to get to see for free on basic cable. So to me, that's, that is going to help the sport of boxing. The fights we want to see getting in front of the biggest audience possible. I think it's a fantastic fight. I lean toward Lomachenko. You have to. I mean, his boxing skill, his record is incredible. But, I said this when they first started talking about the fight. I said the longer it went, the more I think it would favor Teofimo because he's such a big dude. And that size is going to get up there. And as he gained experience and he had that advantage of size, he'd know how to use it. I don't know how many more fights at lightweight Teofimo is going to have. I think this fight and maybe one other one, maybe not even another one. He is a big guy. You look at him in his training video that he puts out, and he's huge. And I ask, and you can find it on YouTube now, I asked Vasily, I said, if there was a featherweight fight right now and it was a big money fight, could you fight at featherweight? And he said 100%. So this is a guy that's a lightweight champion who could still fight at featherweight, and Teofimo was kind of edging off to 140. So I think that gives, with the power that he has and more experience, I think it brings it back into the middle. I still favor Vasily in the fight, but if Teofimo wins, I don't think it's going to be this massive upset, this, earth-shattering win that a lot of people may characterize it as.
I think, Kevin, win, lose, or draw, I think, Teofimo moves up to the 140 like you touched on. Where do you think Lomachenko goes? Because he's kind of cleaned out those divisions apart from maybe, Gervonta Davis.
Yeah, I mean, and then you talk about, is that going to be a doable fight in there? I mean, there's so many good fights at lightweight for him. If you take, Lopez, then you go, you mentioned Gervonta Davis. You have Devin Haney as a guy that, could be up there. Like, I don't think Devin Haney is ready for him today. Mm-hmm. But in 6 or 9 months or a year, I think Devin Haney could be a factor with those fast hands. Even Ryan Garcia. I think Ryan under Eddie Reynoso is a lot bigger threat, and Ryan has his flaws as a fighter, and including this with his chin, right? His chin's up, but he's got incredibly fast hands, and he's got a really good strategist in his corner, and a guy that's going to fix a lot of those flaws. So I think there's fights for him if he wants to stay, but it's going to be where does the big money come? Does somebody else pop up somewhere? It wouldn't surprise me if he ends up fighting Navarrete at some point, because top ranked guys out there. But I just think, it's going to depend on where the big money is. Does he fight Burchelt? Does he fight Oscar Valdez? The winner of that fight. But I think if Loma wins this fight, he's going to be able to call his shots pretty well. And there's enough good fights in and around where he is that, he won't have to worry.
How many more fights do you think we'll have of Lomachenko? Because he seems the sort of uber professional guy that when he kind of starts to reach the end, he'll know. And he'll disappear. I don't think he's the sort of person he's more legacy than he is here for another payday.
I agree with that. And, you could say, hey, did I see any signs of decline in his fight against Luke Campbell? He wasn't Superman against Luke Campbell, right? I think Luke Campbell fought him pretty well, and Lomachenko won, 10 of the rounds, right? But, Campbell gave him some trouble, and, we're used to seeing Loma just, make guys quit and be so dominant. So was that a sign of decline on Loma's part, or was that a sign that he's just human, or was it a sign of, the size mismatch, that Luke Campbell's a tall, rangy guy, left-handed, all that kind of stuff. So I think that, we don't have a good read on where he is, yet. I think this fight will tell us a lot. I get the sense from talking to him that he is really motivated. I mean, that he really wants to perform, and that you're going to see a good Loma. And I think if he feels like he can keep doing that, then he's going to stick around. I totally agree with you, Michael, that I think when he feels like his best is not achievable anymore, he's going to walk. He's not going to fight for the money. He's going to say, you know what, I fought 400 times in the amateurs. I fought X number of times in the pros. I won all these world titles. It was nice talking to you guys. See you later, and go do what's in the next phase of his life. I
don't think it'll be an announcement either. I think he'll finish the fight, and we'll all be speculating about another fight, and he'll just say that's it. Yeah,
I think what we might hear is, Bob Arum say, I talked to Loma and he told me he's not going to fight anymore. I agree with you. I don't think Loma's going to call a press conference and take questions, about his retirement. That is not him.
We talked about Teofimo Lopez likely moves up, win or lose after this Lomachenko fight. He might have one more at 135, but Mike and I have talked about it on the show before. We think that he goes up regardless of the outcome. Top Rank obviously has Jose Ramirez at 140, unified champ, and then they have a co-promotional deal with Josh Taylor, who's also at 140. Do you think that if Lopez moves up to 140 following this fight, especially if Ramirez and Taylor have already had that unification matchup, do you think Ramirez and Taylor move to 147 and they let Lopez take 140? Like the Top Rank kind of has a little bit more options at 147 for Terrence Crawford, and then now has Lopez at 140 to try to clean it up there?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. The problem, I would love to see, especially if Lopez wins the fight and he comes up and he's got 3 of the belts at 135, and then he can go up and choose between, whoever wins, Josh Taylor or Ramirez, and say, I'm going to go for all 4 belts. Winning 7 belts in 2 fights would be an incredible achievement, and I would like to see that. But, these goofy mandatories are going to pop up, and the organizations are going to sit there and, try to split the championships, both at lightweight and at super lightweight. So I think that's probably, the likely scenario. So I do think, given that the players are top rank based, that, it's more likely than not that Lopez will get a chance to fight, probably both of those guys, the winner and the loser, but I don't know that it's going to be an immediate fight. As far as, them going up to fight Crawford, I have not heard Josh Taylor say that. If he said that, talking about fighting at welterweight, I personally have missed that. Ramirez has talked about it, but I think Ramirez is one of those guys too, a little bit like Teofimo, a little bit like Vasily, that we talked about a couple seconds ago. He is a legacy guy, and he's a guy who wants to give his fans something, and he cares about his fans and thinks about them. And I think if he sees Lopez coming up with all that hardware from 135, and he if we assume he beats Josh Taylor, which is a big assumption, I think that's a great fight, and I think he would stick around for it.
Kevin, any truth behind, I know they went back and forth on social media, but Jamel Charlo and Terence Crawford?
No. No, that was never an issue.
Okay, I was going to say, I was reading a story before the podcast today, and I must have missed it because I was thinking I've never heard this rumor before.
And look at that. Terrence has got a lot of balls, right? But that would be, fighting a guy that big. As far as I know, there's never been a hint of that kind of conversation.
The size difference would be amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of what Loma does a lot of times now, right? Because, it'd just be, again, Terrence is a guy that probably could fight 140 if he wanted, and Charlo's going to be going up to middleweight not too much longer. It would be a huge size disadvantage, and I just don't see it makes that much sense for Terrence. I think he's really desperate to get Errol Spence in the ring. If they could pull that fight off after the Garcia fight, I think that would be something that that it would be way, way more likely. And Errol Spence, when I had Errol Spence on Yahoo Sports, we were doing a preview show for the Pacquiao Thurman fight at the weigh, and we did a live preview show. And Spence walked over, and I said, "This is a guy that looks like a light heavyweight that's fighting at welterweight, same size as Manny Pacquiao." So he's a big enough challenge, let alone Charlo.
Cut that question out, Danny, when we go to production.
Kevin, you mentioned earlier, as we're talking about Teofimo and Lomachenko, we touched on Luke Campbell and then Ryan Garcia, obviously, are also at 135. Ryan Garcia earlier today, was airing out his grievances again on his situation in terms of this potential fight with Luke Campbell. What's the latest you've heard on that? Because we thought we were going to expect some type of announcement, a while back, and it doesn't seem like anything's coming down. What have you heard? I
had heard all was well with the fight until today. Now, I haven't seen what he said today because I was out most of the day today, so I did not hear his comments. I was under the impression that they were close to a deal and were ready to go get the fight. So. But perpetually, look, he's from Canelo's camp. Canelo and Oscar are not the best of friends anymore. And I think, that Canelo has some gripes there. And, Ryan's issues, I would like to talk to him more about. I have talked to him about it in the past, but I'd like to talk to him more about it to have a better feel for what he's thinking at this point. I think, he's, the fan following he brings is kind of like Oscar in Oscar's early days. But he is not the successful fighter that Oscar was. Oscar was fighting a far better level of competition at a similar time frame where they are.
Do you think it crosses over, though? That's the other thing that I've always wondered is he may have 3 million, 6 million followers on Instagram, but does that transition into people actually purchasing tickets, buying T-shirts? Because I know they claim that he sold out the Honda Arena. They sold out what they opened up. Right. They didn't open up the whole arena.
Right. Yeah, boxing promoters, you always got to be careful. And, there's always ways. But, I think it transitions to some degree because the people want to support him, right? And it just makes awareness about his fight. So, if let's say you two aren't boxing fans and I'm telling you, hey, this guy Ryan Garcia is great, and you have big, social media followings, and you go out and say he's great, it just reaches more and more people, and you're going to touch more boxing fans, and you're going to touch more fans who may want to see it. And I was there at the height of Oscar Mania, in El Paso when literally there was girls screaming. It was like the Beatles in 1964, when it was crazy. I remember girls throwing underwear at Oscar and bras at Oscar. That is no lie. That happened. And, and so I think Ryan is kind of in that same boat. But I think, as I said, the level of competition is there. So with Oscar, you had both. You had a guy that won an Olympic gold medal that was beating really good fighters in the pros early on, winning championships and fighting a higher level. So Ryan hasn't had that yet. So he needs to get out there to really maximize that, his Instagram following. He needs to get out there and win some fights and show that he's the real deal. And if he can do that, then I think it'll be huge for him, right? That'll be something else. And they'll market fights directly to those people. There's no doubt that they would do that, but he has to first cement himself as more than just a teen idol. He has to cement himself as a teen idol who can fight.
Right.
Do you think that is the issue? Do you think that the fact that he has to prove himself and he has, those, technical faults like keeping his chin up, going backing up in straight lines, dropping his hands, is the reason that I don't know if it's him. Obviously, none of us know whether it's him that's making, the issue about the fight day or whatever, because Luke Campbell's going to be his biggest test, and Luke Campbell could be somebody that, right, like Garcia, if he keeps getting beat, if he goes into these big fights, he could be like a firework. He just goes up, boom, explodes, and that's it. We don't see him again.
Yeah, I think with Ryan, the thing is, it's all about money. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. And it's not who he beat. It's not, it comes down to money. And, he's, some of the shows he made $50,000 and, he's saying, hey, look, I brought all these people here. I'm making $50,000. One of the fights, Golden Boy got a bigger license fee from DAZN than he got paid. Right. And he was like, hey, I'm the fighter. Why is this happening? And, I sympathize with him on that. I get that. But by the same token, promoters have to make money, because if they don't make money, then there are no fights. They're the ones that put the fights on. So it's a tough business, and I think Golden Boy could have done a better job of keeping him busy. And if they had done that and he had gotten the wins and gotten up there, then I don't know that we would be in this situation. But when's the last time he fought? It was last year on the Kovalev, right? I mean, am I mistaken? That he fought since he was on the Kovalev card?
Was it the Honda Center when he beat Francisco Fonseca?
It might have been that. Yeah. So it's been a while. Regardless, it was before the pandemic began. So that's how many months is that? And I just think that you need to have that kid busy.
So, Ken, if you had to put a percentage chance, just based on your experience in the fight game, that fight happens before the end of this year, what would you put on it?
I would say 75%. I think, Golden Boy really needs to do something. I mean, they haven't had hardly any shows. They got to deal with DAZN, and they got to deal in good faith with DAZN on their deal. DAZN is not happy with them on the Canelo situation. So they have to, kind of thread the needle here. So I think they'll make that fight happen. I think the odds are good that fight does happen. And, we'll see what happens. But I feel comfortable that they'll get that made, because it's really an important one for them to make.
And speaking of DAZN, they just announced two events for the beginning of November, November 7th and November 27th. November 7th, Devin Haney goes up against Yuriorkis Gamboa. What do you think about that matchup?
Gamboa to me is, past his prime, it's a fight that I don't really care for all that much, but it's a typical boxing promoter move. They get a name, somebody that they think the public knows. But, as I was saying earlier, if you go out there and you ask the man on the street who is they probably don't know Devin Haney, let alone Yuriorkis Gamboa, right? And so I don't know that they're going to get the benefit of, Gamboa like they think they're going to get. And so I'm not crazy about that one, to be honest with you.
And then November 27th, Daniel Jacobs, Gabe Rosado. What do you think?
Again, when's the last time Gabe Rosado won a fight? And why is Daniel Jacobs fighting a guy like this? I mean, especially at 168. I like guys like Rosado, put him on the undercard where they're and match him with somebody that's going to make him, give him a go, and have that as an undercard bout on TV where it's going to be exciting. But Gabe Rosado, bless his heart, is not a guy that's going to be beating an elite guy at this point, if he ever was, but certainly not at this point of his career. And Danny Jacobs is an elite guy. Why is Danny Jacobs fighting him? It doesn't make sense to me. DAZN is really, I'm disappointed in what they're offering. I mean, I have never stopped paying them for the service, and what am I getting for this money? And I look at it from the public standpoint. I said, why would the public pay DAZN at this point, especially in the U.S.? Why would the public pay DAZN for what they're getting? Very, very little.
Right. And then moving on, obviously, this past Saturday, the 3rd of October, from the bubble in your neck of the woods, Kevin, at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. As we mentioned at the start of the show, I don't think nothing's going to top this fight. And even though we still have a couple months left in the year, but in terms of excitement and, intrigue and everything keeping your attention, Jose Zepeda gets the 5th round KO over Ivan Baranchyk. 8 knockdowns between both fighters throughout this 5-round contest. What'd you think, Kevin?
I loved it. I mean, I thought it was the craziest fight. It reminded me of George Foreman, Ron Lyle back in '76. I mean, that was a nutty fight. And nobody expected Ron Lyle to get in there and do what he did with George, and they were just going back and forth like Rock'em Sock'em Robots. And I think that's what we saw here. And there could have been a ninth knockdown. I think Zepeda got screwed out of a knockdown. Was it what round?
Second round.
Second round, yeah. But he got screwed out of a knockdown there. So yeah, it was just an unbelievable firefight, and I thought the way it ended was perfect too, because Baranchyk hurt, drops Zepeda. Zepeda looks in a lot of trouble. You think, clock's running down in that round. You're thinking, boy, he may not even beat the count. He gets up, and you're thinking, okay, does Baranchyk have enough time to finish him? And then boom, with that hook, just drops him, and the fight's over with that one punch. I mean, it was so dramatic. It's going to take something. I mean, there's some good fights coming up at the end of the year, but it's going to take, Burchelt and Oscar Valdez is still to come, Lopez and Lomachenko still to come, Danny Garcia and Errol Spence, fights that I think are going to be good, but it is going to take a big, big, big effort to top that one to be fight of the year.
Obviously, a lot of people are saying fight of the year. Some people are saying, the best fight they've ever seen. Obviously, Kevin, you've watched a hell of a lot of boxing. Where does that rank in your all-time?
I mean, it's not the best fight I've ever seen by a long stretch. And I think when I talk about fights like that, there's a lot of crazy fights that, that I've seen that were guys that we never heard of that are out there. But you have to factor in the skill levels. That's why I tweeted out the other day, Ali Frazier 3 on October 1st. And I said, maybe the greatest fight of all time, because the action was unbelievable. The conditions were adverse to the fighters, really hot, really humid, no air conditioning, 100 degrees, high humidity, and two of the greatest fighters who ever lived going at it. And the action was incredible. These two fighters, in all due respect to them, are not Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier. And so the skill level is not quite the same. The skill level is high. Hey, I'm not dogging the fight. I love it. I love the fight. But I'm just saying, when I look, Hagler and Hearns, and, you go through the list of the greatest fights of all time, I mean, it's going to be out there somewhere, but I don't know that, people who are saying now the greatest fight ever, they just haven't watched enough fights.
What did you think of Jose Zepeda's interview afterwards? I thought it was very refreshing and very honest, for him to just sort of say, I get nervous and, I underestimate myself a lot of the time. And, because, boxers, obviously, they kind of go the other way. They go the uber ego. So I thought it was very refreshing and very honest of him.
I'm going to talk to him tomorrow, so I'll see what he has to say now that he's had a chance to clear his head. I respected him immensely for what he did and for the way he conducted himself post-fight. When I looked at the fight, and I said in my fight weekend story, I thought it was going to be a good fight. I told people, watch this fight. It's going to be fun. I like Baranchyk to win the fight, but I knew it was, kind of a 50-50 fight. But I looked at Zepeda more as a boxer, and a guy that, he's going to get into it, but he's going to be more of a boxer. And he got in there and just like he would, I don't know what he thought he was, Marvin Hagler or something, but it was incredible. Those punches he was throwing, and, he's going down, popping up and knocking Baranchyk down. It was just amazing.
How much wilder do you think that atmosphere could have been if there was no pandemic and fans, packed that arena to capacity?
Yeah, if the fight probably wouldn't have been in Las Vegas if there was no, because that was a fight that would not have drawn in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. So if it was in Las Vegas, there wouldn't have been a huge crowd anyways. But if it was somewhere else where it probably should have been, I think that it would have been nuts. And the drama, we would be talking about it even more than we already are now, because the fans would have gone crazy and would have been into it. And that's the one thing. Like, I've been in a lot of shows. I've been in the Top Rank bubble. I've been in the UFC bubble. A lot of shows since the pandemic started. And, after a while you get used to it and you're not even missing the fans, but it's like you forget how good they are when the big fights, And I know I've been doing this for 40 years. And I remember I was sitting next to Tim Dahlberg, one of the few writers who's still been at it longer than I have. He's AP columnist at the Mayweather Pacquiao fight. And I said, they were walking, I think Manny was walking out. And I said, I've been doing this so long, and I literally have goosebumps right now. And, watching them come to the ring, this big fight and this one that people talked about for years. And when you have an event like they had last night, fans just make that so much better.
Absolutely. Kevin, and then obviously Mike, you can obviously chime in on this. Like, Baranchyc's trained by Pedro Diaz. He has been for quite a few fights, or maybe it's more than that. At least to me, like, I feel like Baranchyc's, like, he's kind of had the same style, especially when he fought Josh Taylor. There's not really any defense. Like, he doesn't. Like, I haven't really seen any. Yeah, so like I haven't really seen. Is that something that maybe they could be attributed to Pedro Diaz, or like I would think, like, especially following the Josh Taylor fight, that there would be some improvements or some changes within his game, especially on the defensive side. But as of this past Saturday, like it doesn't seem like that happened. What's your take on that?
Well, I think that he's been successful doing what he's doing. He won a world championship. He's been one of the top fighters in his weight class. And so it's hard to get a guy to really fundamentally change when he's winning. I think now they might have a chance to go back to the drawing board. But I agree with you. You saw him. He was throwing punches like this, looping shots. And he's open up for good fighters. He's open up a fast-handed counterpuncher. Now, Zepeda is not necessarily what I would call this fast-handed counterpuncher. But I thought, like that last shot that he landed, boom, just a real short. It didn't travel a big long distance, right? And it was right on the point. But yeah, his defense is lacking, and I think his footwork sometimes is lacking. It leads him to be wide open. I think somebody like Teddy Atlas would get him more in balance and have him, he has a lot of raw ingredients. And obviously we see the heart that he has, the way he fought. And I thought, if you remember the Josh Taylor fight, he went down, twice in that fight, if I'm not mistaken. I thought, other than the two knockdowns, he fought pretty good, and he put, we know Josh Taylor is one of the best fighters in the world. He pushed Taylor and made Taylor work. And, so I think Baranchyk is the real deal, but he has, you're correct. I mean, he has some flaws. He's like like today in baseball, all these guys swing for home runs. So they strike out a lot too. And they, their on base percentage a lot of times isn't high, but, they're hitting the ball out of the park. And I think that's the kind of guy Baranchyk is. I think he'd be better off if, maybe he were a doubles hitter and hitting for a little more average, as opposed to, going for the home runs all the time. But that's what makes him the guy that, we love to watch too.
So I think they were saying on the broadcast that Zepeda is now ranked number 1, WBC mandatory. Do you think he realistically gets a title shot at one of the guys at 140, or do they run it back and throw a rematch with Baranchyk?
Yeah, you look at it. I mean, I don't know that we're going to see a rematch because Baranchyk for sure is going to need a long time off. He's can't come back too soon after that. And Zepeda probably needs that time off as well. And then you get into what we talked about before. You have if Teofimo moves up, you have him there. You have Ramirez. You have Taylor. Et cetera. I mean, at some point the WBC will force the issue, and the title might get stripped, right? But I think for the time being, it'll be a while for him to get that shot.
Also on that card, Gabriel Flores, one of the young guys over there at Top Rank, got the 10-round unanimous decision win over Ryan. All right, Mike, you're going to have to help me on this. How do you pronounce the last name?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but Kilweski?
That's as close as I was going to get. So God bless you.
What do you think about that fight?
In Flores last night, to be honest with you, really disappointed in Flores. And in fact, his last 2 fights, he hasn't been what I thought he was going to be. And I think, that might be attributed to his age. He still hasn't grown into his body. He's still a young guy. He's 20 years old, and he's fighting against men. And not killers, but increasingly talented men. And that, it gets harder. And so not everybody is a prodigy that's going to come out there at 18, 19 years old and, do it. But I was disappointed. I actually talked to Todd DeBuff about that today, the president of Top Rank, and I mentioned it, and he agreed with me. So I think, you look at him, and this is a kid, you have to say, okay, circle him. He's got some raw tools, but we got to see what that next level is for him, and I'm not sure the right fight to make for him. That's the thing that's tough. What kind of fighter do you put him with? You put him in with somebody who's going to blow out. And if he does that, yeah, maybe it helps his confidence, but does it help him in his development? He's in kind of a weird spot, I think.
You mentioned, somebody like Teddy Atlas would be somebody maybe good in terms of a trainer for Baranchyk. In that same regard, for somebody like Gabriel Flores, kind of hypothetically speaking, who do you think would fit good with his style and would really kind of make him go to the next level, if possible?
Freddie Roach. Freddie Roach is a guy, I think, if you look at what Freddie does with guys like that, Freddie makes those guys better. And another guy that I think would be good for him is a different type of trainer than Freddie, but I think Abel Sanchez, because I did you guys get the sense watching him last night that he didn't have that extra push, that extra gas in the tank, right? And I think, Abel's a guy that's going to kick him in the butt, say, you're going to do things the way I want you to do it, or else. And Abel's a taskmaster. I play a lot of golf with Abel Sanchez, and I heard stories, and he tells me things. And he could have been the trainer of the heavyweight champion of the world, but he wasn't too nice to Andy Ruiz, and so he was out with Andy. But he's the kind of guy that has that ability to take a fighter with that particular skill set, get him into really good shape, and fine tune him to make him a better fighter. I think Gabriel has some ability, but he's at a weird spot. That doesn't mean I'm down on him, but he's kind of at a weird spot in his development right now.
That's the kind of moment where either the fighter or the father have to kind of own up and look at themselves and say, I've taken you as far as I can, and you have to step back from the limelight, which is often, I assume, very hard.
And, you look in all sports and teams, they just tune out the coach after a while, and it just, or for whatever reason that, it's just not working. And I think, he needs to take that next level up, and he's got the ability to do that. And his father got him there. And, hey, you can be part of the team, but bring in a new voice. That's what Emmanuel Stewart was so good at doing, looking at somebody and coming in, and he was able to, say, okay, I like the base you have, but here's a couple things you're missing. I'll help you with that, and I'll be the voice to push you forward. And he needs somebody of that ilk. A guy that I respect a lot as a trainer, I don't necessarily think maybe is the perfect guy for Flores, but somebody like Stephen Breadman Edwards, I think is really a knowledgeable boxing guy. He's really fundamentally solid. And he's a demanding guy, and I like that. He's going to make his guys come into shape. And I think, Edwards would be a guy. I think Flores' style maybe is a little different than Bread's style is, but I think he could help Gabe. Gabe's still a moldable fighter. He's 20 years old, and he's growing. He has a lot more experience than most guys 20 years old. He's fought a lot of fights as a pro, so that's a benefit to him. So there's guys out there that can help him, and he can still do it with his father, but I think more likely they're going to have to bring somebody in.
Yeah, Breadman Edwards, shout out to Mr. Edwards. He was our guest last week on here on the last round. Also on that card, this is a very Italian name, I think. Guido Vianello gets the majority draw, or they get the majority. It's a draw pretty much over 6 rounds over Kingsley Ibe. Did you get a chance to watch that fight?
I did not see Guido's fight. I was watching UFC, so I was switching back and forth, so I did not see Guido's fight. So I'm a little disappointed, to be honest with you, because I thought Guido, that was a setup fight for him, and I thought we would see a little better out of him than we did in that particular performance.
He started off well. You could see Guido was obviously fit. He had good feet for a heavyweight, but he got caught early by Kingsley eBay, and he just kept piling on the pressure. And I think eBay, because he's kind of like a traveling salesman, and I think he's had quite a good time in the top rank, bubble, trying to sell insurance to Tim Bradley and people like that. He's kind of built up a bit of a cult favorite following. He probably should have won it. I think he kind of Vianello got an A-side draw, should we say? So
yeah, that's too bad. I hate to see that happen. It's very common in boxing that happens. I hate to see it, but I think Guido has talent, and he's a big dude. But those heavyweights are slow developing, and so I didn't see his fight, so I don't want to be critical of him. But it didn't sound good.
No, if he can work it out, just his he was taking too many shots. He was, admiring his work. He'd get in the pocket, throw his shots, and then just stand there. And even his corner were telling him, Kevin Barry was telling him, get off this out of line. You're standing there too much.
Right.
So he just kept doing it. But if he can sort that out with the footwork he has for a heavyweight, he'd be dangerous.
I agree. I that's what I like about a lot of the heavyweights out there now. There's a lot of good young heavyweights, Jamal Anderson, and, there's other ones out there that are, really talented. And I think, they all are not going to develop. Filip Hrgovic recently fought, has some ability. I think we have some guys that, could make the heavyweight division interesting in a couple of years.
Absolutely. Yeah. We were talking about that last night, about the younger guys in the heavyweight division. So we definitely agree on that. Also, Duke Reagan gets the 4-round unanimous decision win over John Moraga. Mike, Kevin, did you guys get a chance to see that fight?
I didn't see that either. John Moraga is a former UFC fighter, so not sure that is for Duke a good opponent for him to start off with. But there you go. He got it. I know Top Rank's really high on him.
Yeah, just what I was going to touch on. Obviously, you can see Top Rank are high on Duke because he was on the main portion of the card. So kind of an easy victory for him. You can see, he was just in there. He got a few rounds under his belt, and onwards and upwards for him. He looks a good talent.
Yeah, Moraga's a talented guy in MMA, and he fought for the title. So, but he didn't strike me as a guy that was going to be a boxer. So when I saw that match was made, I was a little bit surprised.
And also Mitchell Sipe, I believe that's how you pronounce it, gets the first round TKO over James Barnes. What's your guys' take on that?
Yeah, I didn't see. I was watching UFC.
Right. Mike?
Reminded me of two Butterbean fights. It was just two big guys just in there swinging. He caught him. He went down, got back up. Stipe just jumped on him again, and the referee was, that's all we need to see, because I think they both came in at, one of them was 290 pounds and the other one was like 250. So two big dudes, just kind of just like watching, like kicking out at a bar, really.
I was there for the glory days, quote unquote, of Butterbean.
I would like to see. I didn't mind that fight on the undercard because it was kind of what it was. You kind of just saw them. You're like, there's two out of shape guys, but
right.
you just kind of like blink and you miss it. You knew this is going one round because that's all they've got.
Yeah, they're not going to be able to. If they go into a second round, it's going to be really ugly.
Butterbean, yeah, that's the guy we should get on the show, Mike. Definitely Butterbean, and
yeah, he's got a lot of stories to tell.
Definitely, yeah.
Is he still around? Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's in Alabama. Yeah. You can track him down. Yeah,
I'm sure we could track him down. Yeah. He's lived an interesting life, especially going over professional wrestling and knocking their guys out. He was all over the place, especially in the 90s. And also rounding out the whole event, Haven Brady Jr. Gets the 4-round TKO over Gawar Karya. Did I pronounce that right, Mike?
I believe so. Kind of a strange fight, Haven Brady won, but there was a lot of low blows, a lot of holding. They were kind of pulling each other down. The referee was far too involved. Not the greatest fight for his debut, really, but maybe just the opponent just grabbing him and throwing him around the ring a bit too much. So when you see the referee and you kind of acknowledge him too much, the fight's not been great.
Right.
Well, Kevin, we obviously appreciate your time, especially giving us your time here on your birthday, on your 38th birthday today, October 4th, 2020. Just before we let you go, as of the schedule right now, boxing that has been announced, that should be going forward as of, official announcements. What do you think the most significant event that's going to happen before the end of the year?
Most significant event, I would say Loma Lopez. I mean, I think you're talking there. That's 3 of the 4 belts, 2 of the Loma. Some people have number 1 pound for pound. Everybody has them in the top 5 against a young champion. I think that's the most significant. Errol Spence versus Garcia is a hugely significant fight. A lot of people are high on Gervonta versus Leo Santa Cruz, and while I think I understand why they're high. I think there's a weight discrepancy there. Leo's best weight is at featherweight, and he's going to be fighting and I'm one of those convinced that Gervonta's never going to make 130. He's going to fight at 135. So, poor Leo is going to be in that gap there. But the good thing is, Burchelt versus Valdez, there's a lot of good fights on the schedule. And I think that's the good thing for boxing. And if we come out of this pandemic and if we've learned and improved on anything, it's that we make more competitive fights on a more regular basis. That can only be, the pandemic's been horrible, but that could be one good side effect of it for boxing fans.
Real quick before we let you go, I'm glad you mentioned Davis and Santa Cruz. When's the last time, and maybe I'm just ignorant to if this happened recently or more recent than I thought, when's the last time that two world titles essentially were on the line in one fight like this from two different weight classes at 130 and 135?
The only time I can think of that going back was Donnie Lalonde and Sugar Ray Leonard. I cannot think of when that happened, any intervening time since. Maybe there could have been like in a flyweight, in a junior flyweight bout that that happened in Asia that I missed. But even that, I don't think so. So that's not a common occurrence, right? So I think that's, that is very, very interesting. And that's a little bit of the intrigue. But I also think that's a built-in excuse for Gervonta. He's been having trouble making weight. And now if he misses 130, well, we still have the 135-pound title. And to me, that's not fair to Leo. I think Leo is, past it, honestly. I don't think he's at his best, and Gervonta's still, on the upswing. So, already it's not, in my opinion, the fairest fight. And then you turn around and you put this weight thing in there that, that definitely favors Gervonta. And, I think that's going to make it tough for Leo. But you know what? He took the fight, and, he's not going to complain.
Yeah, absolutely. He's really a pretty mellow guy. He doesn't really ever say too much. So, but on that note, Kevin, I guess the last thing to say is just say, happy birthday. We hope you had a nice birthday today.
Thank you, guys.
And we're glad you came back on here on the last round, and you're obviously welcome back anytime in the future.
It was so scary last time, so I wasn't sure I could do it, but then I said, what the hell?
Well, we appreciate your time as always, Kevin, and happy birthday, like we said.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. See you soon.
Kevin Iole, man, he's a good one. We get these rotations of these guys, these credible veteran journalist in the sport of boxing. They're always the good ones to get on because they know so much, especially somebody like Kevin Iole who can speak about so much history and so much ins and outs of the sport. It's cool, man. And hopefully the listeners out there, hopefully you guys are liking these interviews, and especially with all this pay-per-view stuff, and we know people are interested. Whether you people say you're not interested or not, like, you're interested. People love the whole pay-per-view discussion, whether it's good or bad, right, Mike?
Yeah, whether it's good or it's bad, people are still kind of talking about it, and especially on Twitter, people go back and forth, and it's just good having people on like Kevin because they've been around the sport for so long. They're actually friends with a lot of the the names in the sport, the promoters, the managers, the fighters. So they speak to them on the daily. They've got their ear to the ground. They know what's going on a lot better than us podcasters. So it's good for him to get on. A lot of the stuff to do with the Manny Pacquiao and stuff like that at the start of the show, I found really interesting. Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. Like you said, like their network in the sport is obviously because they have so many years in. Obviously, a lot more years than we do. It's a lot more. Kevin's only 38, Danny, so he's not been. That's true. I retract my previous statement. Hopefully, he doesn't listen to this part. I'm going to edit this out. This is going to come out. But like I said, obviously his network is in the sport of boxing with contacts and sources, and just it's very vast. So ours is. I feel like we're proud of our network and what we can obtain and stuff like that in terms of info and stuff like that. But it doesn't compare to somebody like his. But he's the WBC with the IBA. He's a franchise champion, right? That's what you would call it. But moving on, this past Sunday, the 4th of October, which is today. I'm just saying it in past tense. From the Marshall Arena on the Zone. Milton Keynes, is that how you say it? Milton Keynes, yeah, that's correct.
On DAZN, Joshua Bowatsi gets the 7th round TKO over Marco Calic. This was for the WBA International Light Heavyweight Championship. We were talking about it just before we came on air, Mike. Bowatsi was actually losing this fight, at least according to many people and according to us, and then was able to, get the stoppage win. What'd you think about the performance?
See, a lot of people were high on him, and then you had a lot of other people that were kind of saying, he still has a lot to prove. He obviously has the amateur pedigree. Matchroom are pushing him. He speaks well. Normally his performance, he looks well. To give him, something in his favor, he was out of the ring for around 400 days. So he obviously, was a little bit stale. He also gave a very honest review of himself on IFL TV, saying that, there was no excuses really going in, maybe a little bit stale, but, he needs to kind of, go back, look at that performance and see what went wrong. Or was it just Calic was better than we thought? Are we taking too much away from him? He had a good amateur pedigree as well. He was, 11-0 going into that fight. So, maybe he was just better than we thought, because obviously he wasn't a name that we knew. It doesn't mean that, he wasn't a good fighter as such. So, maybe give a little bit of credit to him. Bowatsi managed to pull out the win in the end. So maybe that was good for him, really, that he actually did struggle a little bit in one of the upcoming fights. So maybe he has to look at himself and think, maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was, or maybe, I slacked off a little bit here and a little bit here. So we'll see.
You're right. I think that's always like that's always hard to determine, especially in the fight game, is that, somebody like Bowatsi obviously is the A side in this fight, and he was the more well-known name. But, and then like you mentioned, like after the outcome, even though he won, there's people who are going to say, oh, he was exposed. He's not as good as people thought he was. If he got pretty much, he made a fight was competitive with Marco Calic, or is it just that Marco Calic, it styles makes fights, or Calic was just better than people thought, and he just didn't have the name recognition as somebody on the A side like Bowatsi. I mean, I think that's always going to be an issue for situations like that, especially when the name recognition is tilted to one side more than the other. What do you think?
No, I agree. It's one of those things where you just kind of have to look at it in depth. He needs to go back, look at it with his coach. Was it that Calic was just good, or was he just, a little bit slow in getting started? Because I thought, Calic probably won the first 5 rounds as such, and then it wasn't until like the 6th and 7th round that, Bowatsi seemed to warm up and, kind of get a grip of what was going on. And it sounds like, the towel was thrown in because he broke Calic's jaw, essentially. So, he got the win in the end, so hopefully it's just a bad performance, because I think, being a Brit, we want to see those big fights between him and, Anthony Yard, Callum Johnson. Those fights seems to be maybe a little bit further away after this fight. Maybe Bowatsi needs to, take a couple more fights before, jumping in with, Callum Johnson, because don't forget, Callum Johnson dropped Beterbiev or Beterbiev, however you pronounce it.
How realistic is a fight with Anthony Yard? I know that there's been some reports, or I wouldn't say reports. It's been Eddie Hearn has acknowledged it, so has Frank Warren, that him and Frank Warren were supposed to like get lunch or kind of have conversations and stuff like that. And then one fight they've been talking about was Bowatsi and Anthony Yard. How realistic do you think that is, that we could see that in 2021?
I think that's one of those fights where they both take their individual paths. They try their best to claim a world title, and then, later down the line, why do it for a pot of 1, 2, 3 million when they, can pick up a world title each, or, at least one of them picks one up and one of them works their way into a mandatory, and they could do it for a 5, 6 million pot. Right.
Yeah. It always comes back to money wherever it's at, right, Mike?
It's a business essentially. I'm sure, if it was me and you, we would say the same thing. Why do it for, $500,000, which is, extremely good money to me and you, but when you can do it for millions later down the line. So look at what Mayweather and Pacquiao did. They could have done it for a few million, and they ended up doing it for 200 million or something ridiculous. That 5 or 6 years too late for us, but the pot was bigger.
I'm more like Lomachenko, Mike. I'm a legacy kind of guy. So, also moving on, Chantel Cameron gets a 10-round unanimous decision win over Adriana Dos Santos for the vacant WBC female super lightweight title. The original opponent, Araujo, she failed to make weight. She was 5 pounds over. What's going on here, Mike?
Well, that was the opponent, Dos Santos Araujo. She failed to make weight. She was 5 pounds over.
Sorry, yeah. I didn't read the Araujo. I saw Dos Santos. Sorry. She
weighed in, you know, the WBC obviously do those staggered weights, so they're not losing too much. She weighed in like a couple of days before, overweight. So the WBC told her in advance, like, hey, you can't drop anything less than 145 pounds. So, you know, Chantel Cameron kind of knew that she was going to weigh in over. So the WBC title was only on the line for Chantel Cameron if she won, because of the fact that, you know, Araujo weighed in 5 pounds overweight. So, you know, Chantel Cameron kind of easily won it. Very strange fight that Araujo didn't wear a sports bra. So like her top kept coming down and pretty much nearly exposing her breast. And she kept having to, you know, put it back up during the fight with her glove. It was very odd. That I'd never really seen that before. Like why you wouldn't turn up with, you know, the right a sports bra or something, so she didn't have to do that. It was kind of odd. But yeah,
live TV, Mike.
Yeah, live on DAZN. Even Chantal Cameron was doing interviews after, saying it was kind of off-putting for her, you know, that he kept having to put it up. But yeah, you could kind of see early on that Dos Santos had, obviously, she was experienced, but she was kind of a little bit slow, very methodical, and Chantal Cameron was just, you could see that he was going to go probably all of the rounds and she was going to win by, you know, a wide points decision. But, you know, she picked up a title, and obviously, you know, we can have some British dust-ups hopefully later down the line with, you know, Katie Taylor.
Right.
So,
yeah, that'd be sweet. A Katie Taylor clash in the future. Also on the card, Alan Babich gets the third-round TKO and remains undefeated at 5-0 over Niall Kennedy. What'd you think of that matchup?
The Savage. You know, I was kind of, you could see a huge... you know, height and weight discrepancy. Alan Babich really just comes in and is, you know, kind of more of a street fighter, really. He actually kind of had a better jab than Niall Kennedy, surprisingly, though, even though Kennedy was, you know, substantially bigger and, you know, substantially heavier. Just goes in there, really just puts his head on their chest and just throws as much as he can. So, you know, he's obviously good to watch. But, you know, how many opponents can he do that against? I would assume that Eddie Hearn's going to, you know, just kind of batch him well for as long as he can until he can obviously put him in there against somebody that's, you know, a lot more skilled and is going to be able to, you know, just kind of keep Babich away with a good jab, because he weighs in cruiserweight, but he's fighting at heavyweight.
It's crazy.
So he's a fan's favorite. So I think, you know, Eddie Hearn will wrap it in cotton wool, and, you know, he'll fight, you know, Dave Allen, people like that. I'm kind of think of the name. He's supposed to be fighting next. I just watched the interview with him as well. The name
it'll come to you.
I can't remember his name.
Fight previews this Friday, the 9th of October, from the Bubble once again at the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas on ESPN. For the WBO featherweight, for the vacant WBO featherweight world title, Emmanuel Navarrete goes up against a local fighter here from the Thompson's Boxing Regional Promotion, Ruben Villa, who gets his first world title shot in his career. What do you think about this matchup?
Good matchup. Interesting matchup. Navarrete is very big for the weight.
Well, that's the X factor. He's so big.
He's huge for the weight. Kind of really just bullies his opponent into submission, you know, because he's so much bigger and so much like heavier, because he must, you know, hydrate to, and I would say massively over what the weight category is.
Right.
Because he's such a big guy. I just don't know whether Ruben Villa is going to have the power. You know, he has the skills. He puts combinations together very, very well. Not really much of a knockout power. I don't know whether Navarrete is just going to walk him down. He's just going to be like a juggernaut, you know, like Joe Joyce. And, you know, Villa's going to be popping him with shots, but there's just nothing behind him. And Navarrete is just going to walk him down and just pummel him into submission. What do you think?
I mean, I like I said, going back to my original statement a couple of seconds ago, the size of Navarrete at that weight class is just ridiculous. It's the X factor, and the reach he has over his opponents at that weight class is just like how can you get past that? You know, like I like Ruben Villa. I like Thompson's boxing. I like these guys, especially because they're local in our area. You know, we can kind of go see these guys and see them come up the ranks and then eventually to a world title shot. Like I've seen Ruben Villa fight here on Ontario, California, which isn't too far, at the Doubletree Hotel. I've seen him fight there. You know, he's main evented a couple cards there, I believe. So it's cool to see when, you know, they get to a world title and then they get on a bigger platform like ESPN and stuff. But like, I just think, you know, from a competitive standpoint, Navarrete is just too big, man. He's just too big for that weight class. And as long as he can make the weight class and, you know, people are willing to fight him, especially because he's had a world title before. Now, if he gets this world title, like, you know, if people don't want to fight him, they will fight him, like, because he has a world title. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I mean, they call him the Mexican Iron Man for a reason. You know, what was it? 6 world title bouts in just over 14 months. 14 stoppages in his last 15 fights, 2 of those against Isaac Dogbe.
What? Get out of here.
I think we kind of hit it on the first one. I think that Ruben Villa will be there in the first opening rounds, but I think Navarrete is just going to absorb that punishment. He's just going to follow him around the ring like a Terminator, and it's going to eventually just stop him because Ruben Villa is just going to take such a pounding, he's just going to pummel him into submission like I touched on the first time. The only way I see Ruben Villa winning would be keeping away, being on his bike the whole time, just pot-shotting him from the outside and making it a real boring match.
Right. Yeah.
So Navarrete by stoppage for me if you make me pick one.
Yeah. But I think Villa, I think Villa, just from what I've seen him over the years and him progressing his career, I think he'll give a pretty great effort. He's definitely going to go in there to try to win, especially in his first world title fight. I think he's definitely going to give it his all. But like I said, going back, I sound like a broken record. Navarrete's size is just, you know, so like the X factor. So we'll see. Moving on, Janibek. Okay, Mike, take it again. How do you pronounce the last name?
Ali Kamuli. I don't know. I honestly don't know that one.
That's a tough one. That's a tough one. I think that's one of the toughest ones we've ever seen since we've been doing the show. 8-0 goes up against Gonzalo Correa, who's 16-3. What do you think about this matchup?
Janibek, another one of those, you know, Kazakhstani great amateurs. Turned pro October 2016 after a stellar amateur career. Gold medals at both the Asian and World Championships in 2013 and also competed at the 2016 Rio Olympics. Fighting out of Buddy McGirt's gym here in California. A lot of good things said about him. One of those kind of people that turns pro and just, you know, straight away goes into, like WBC Continental America fights, WBO global fights. He's only 8-0 and he's already fought for 2 of those. So somebody who's going to be moved really, really quickly. This is really kind of just another showcase fight for him. You know, 9th pro fight. He's fighting Correa, who's 16-3. You know, just same sort of list of people, kind of like Lomachenko and those guys that come through. So, you know, they're taking over boxing. That area of the world they're coming out. They're fighting 300 or 400 times as amateurs, winning world championships in, you know, 2, 3, 4 fights as professionals. So, you know, just watch out for those guys.
Global, universal title. I mean, every time we say those words, continental, WBC just introduced Middle Eastern, like a regional title with that they say Amir Khan's in charge of or something like that.
I believe they're also doing a WBC Inland Empire.
No, they're not. Yeah, right.
For our UK fans, that's the region that we kind of live in California.
Yeah. There's like, it's like another county in Southern California. There's like Los Angeles County, San Diego, and Orange County and stuff like that. So they're all kind of all next to each other. I wouldn't be surprised eventually down the line.
Get that 9%.
Yeah. Moving on, Joseph Adorno, 14-0-1, goes up against, I guess he posted bail. I guess he's out. Avery Sparrow, 10-2, who our listeners, you might remember Avery Sparrow. He was supposed to fight Ryan Garcia, I believe, last year out here in Los Angeles at the StubHub Center in Carson, California. and like the day before, I believe, it was announced that he had gotten arrested by federal agents, I believe. Federal agents arrested him for like some warrant, or honestly, I can't even remember what it was for. But like, I think
it's like a domestic violence warrant.
Yeah, it was some type of domestic issue. I didn't keep up with, if he had a court date or not. So I can't really speak on what exactly happened following that. But I remember that fight, Ryan Garcia involved was obviously getting a lot more, it was getting attention because of him, but like it was also getting attention because Avery Sparrow was, I guess, associated or represented by, in some type of quasi way, by the singer Usher.
Yeah.
And who was also, I believe, at the press conference that week or when they announced the fight or something like that. And obviously Sparrow, because he was, would you call it, incapacitated, he couldn't make the fight. So Ryan Garcia fought somebody else. So, I mean, what do you think about Adorno versus Sparrow for this Saturday?
I think obviously, Jovis Adorno should win. He's 14-0, 1 draw, but 12 KOs. Looks good. He's kind of obviously understands boxing, the side of the boxing business. He puts out a lot of, Instagram videos of him doing different things, gets in the ring and, when he realizes that he's better than the opponent, he just gets him out of there. Sparrow is one of those guys that you kind of look at him, and if he took it a lot more seriously, he could be good, because you watch him and in glimpses in his fights, he is good. He's a veteran of the Philadelphia gym wars. So, he knows how to box. It's just everything outside of the ring, getting arrested and, not training and stuff like that. Is he just going to become a journeyman and, never really fulfill that, those glimpses of brilliance that you see?
Right. Yeah. And I remember when Sparrow, like I said, when he was supposed to fight Ryan Garcia before he got arrested, there was people kind of saying like, hey, you know what? Like, because of, coming out of Philadelphia and training in Philadelphia, like, he might give Ryan Garcia a tough fight. And, even now, like, especially at that point where we still haven't really seen Ryan Garcia tested, in with somebody who we know for sure. And like, I remember there was like chatter about Sparrow, like, hey, Sparrow could probably, even though I think Sparrow was coming up in weight, I think, for that fight. So obviously there was issues there, but some people were saying like, hey, he could probably give him at least some good work in that fight. Maybe, make him dig deep to actually fight back and win. But obviously we didn't get to see that. So I'm sure Sparrow's fought, since that Ryan Garcia debacle, but I haven't kept up with his career. So, I'm definitely going to keep an eye on this matchup on Saturday, because I want to see what how he comes out of it. But I agree. I think Adorno is rightfully the favorite. I think realistically he's going to take it, but I'm more intrigued that as a fan and in the media to see how Sparrow does, just because of all the issues that went on last year over here in Los Angeles. So we'll see. So moving on, Viva Las Vegas, Elvis Rodriguez, 9-0, goes up against Cameron Crail. Did I say that right? Or is it Crail? Crail.
I would say Crail, yeah.
This guy is 17, 16, and 3. So he's been in and out, up and down.
We've been over this, Danny. They're baby numbers compared to English journeymen. You need at least 260-odd losses to be classed as a good journeyman.
That's crazy, man. That's crazy. But I mean, in terms of American standards, which is obviously lower than English standards, that's a lot, right? I mean, at least to me.
Yeah, for over here, you don't see those kind of crazy numbers that you see in the UK. I think especially in California, in Las Vegas, and New York, I don't know whether the public out here don't like those sorts of numbers and they don't kind of understand journeyman like they do in the UK, or whether the state commissions just, once you get to 20, 30 losses, whether they just stop licensing you. Kind of a question, when we get back Andy Foster back on, maybe to ask him,
true.
Is that one of the things that, the California State Commission look at?
Right. What do you think about this matchup?
I think it's a good stylistic matchup for Elvis Rodriguez, somebody that I know Top Rank are high on, coming out of Freddie Roach's gym. I believe they'll probably try to get another KO win for him. That's why they've probably gone for, Cameron Crail with 17 wins, 60 losses, 3 draws. Crail has a very mixed match kind of record. He's got 4 wins over previously undefeated prospects. Also has like 4, split and majority decision losses as well. Hasn't really been knocked out, too many times. So he has that, in his corner for this fight against Rodriguez. But I see him being, unfortunately, cannon fodder. And I think we'll probably see Rodriguez 10-0, 10 KOs.
Yeah, I agree with that. Rounding off our previews here this upcoming Saturday, the 10th of October, from the BT Sports Studios in London on the Plus, ESPN Plus. Liam Williams, 22-2-1, goes up against Andrew Robinson, 24-4-1 for the British middleweight title. What's your take on this fight, Mike?
I'm thinking that obviously, Liam Williams wants to get back out there. I believe that he obviously must think that he's going to, defeat Andrew Robinson pretty easily, because he's already the mandatory for the WBO world title held by Demetrius Andrade. So I don't think he would have taken this match if he thought it was kind of a tricky matchup for himself. So I would imagine, Liam Williams seems to, since he's moved up in weight, have found, some power. So I would imagine Liam Williams by KO, but it should be a good matchup, really.
Also on the card, Nathan Gorman, 16-1, goes up against Richard Lartey, or is it Lartey?
Latte, I believe. This was supposed to be on an earlier Frank Warren card, but got pushed back. I believe Latte was either ill or couldn't get a visa or something like that, so this got put back a card. People will remember Latte because he was the big dude with the crazy hairstyle, if I remember rightly, that fought Daniel Dubois and went
that's right. I forgot about that.
Those two just went hell for leather in those few rounds. So this would be a good matchup and a good test for Gorman, because he's not the biggest puncher. And Latte looked like he had some power behind him, but just him and Dubois are just 2 big, strong dudes. So don't know whether this is really a good comeback fight for Gorman. So could be a slip up here. I wouldn't be surprised, put it that way.
What if Richard Lartey changed his nickname to Ice?
Iced latte. Actually, I like that. or vanilla latte. Yeah.
I think Ice is better. It's more of a scare tactic. I think it's more of an impact.
It's scarier than like cinnamon latte.
Cinnamon, pumpkin spice.
Since we're in October, pumpkin spice latte. Yeah, I like that, Danny.
Dennis McCann, 7-0, goes up against the undefeated, the dreaded TBA.
One of the prospects that I think me and you are both high on. I think anybody that's watched some of the Frank Warren cards has seen this kid come through over the last couple of years. I imagine he'll pick someone like fairly easy, some kind of journeyman, maybe somebody that's not really been knocked out so he can get a few rounds. But, McCann, last time he came out, kind of made a statement by stopping Brett Fido in the second round. Only the second person to ever stop Fido in 80 fights.
Crazy.
This kind of shows what kind of potential we're dealing with here. And, big things, hopefully in 2021, I can see him, pushing him up to maybe British level, picking up a British and Commonwealth title, slowly but surely move him on. So big things. I think he's going to be a great talent for the British boxing scene.
Great talent for the British boxing scene. We need to, hopefully when this pandemic is over, hopefully soon, like I said, I know we talked about it before off air. We gotta make a trip to a fight over there across the pond in the UK and do some live shows over there, or one big live show, maybe at a bar, or you guys call them pubs, right?
Pub or a bar, same thing, yeah. It'd be good just to go back over and meet up with some of the listeners, some of the guys we interact with, the guys over at Boxing Social and all those other, Craig Scott, Rob Tebbett, all those guys.
Yeah, it'd be sweet. Hopefully sooner rather than later. But once again, wrapping up here, we appreciate Kevin Iole of Yahoo Sports for jumping on the last round again. I believe this was his second. Have we had him on 2 or 3 times? This is the second time or third?
I think this is the third, once in the recording studio, then twice via Zoom. Right.
Okay. Yeah, because I was like, is this the second or third? But, we always appreciate anytime any guest comes on. But obviously this week we appreciate Kevin Iole, especially coming in on his birthday. the day of his birthday, like all he could have said, oh, it's my birthday, I'm actually, we're a little busy. Oh yeah, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. We understand. Like, we understand people are busy, but especially if it's your birthday, like, hey, so we're definitely grateful and appreciate his time on his 38th birthday, right, Mike?
I'm sure this probably was the highlight of his day. This is probably the greatest present he's ever been given to be a guest on the Last Round podcast on his birthday.
I hope so. And I don't think any gift is ever going to top it from this point forward. But as we're signing off here, go ahead, Mike, and let our listeners know where they can find us on the socials.
At The Last Round 12 on Twitter and Instagram. And obviously you can find us on all good podcast platforms and the Boxing Social YouTube. And obviously next week is episode 100. So we're going to try our best to try and get some big name guests to jump on the show and obviously tune in, because we're going to be previewing probably the biggest fight of the year in Teofimo Lopez against Vasyl Lomachenko.
Definitely. Yeah, arguably the biggest fight, most competitive fight. Arguably. Obviously, there's going to be people out there. There's Danny Garcia, Errol Spence, other stuff in there. But definitely one of the most significant fights up there. Arguably top 2 for the remainder of the year. But once again, guys, thank you for listening. I'm Danny Z. For my co-host, Michael Shepard, this is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round Podcast.